Hello and welcome to another episode of Slow Takes. I'm one of your hosts, Sam Illingworth from the Slow AI Substack. And as ever, I'm joined by...
Hello, my name is Leor from Exploring ChatGPT.
Hello to all of our listeners on the Substack, on YouTube and in podcast form as well, as usual. If you're here, please feel free to like us using any of the various vanity metrics that exist. So the first story, I genuinely think Leor has some kind of like soothsaying ability, because last week Leor made the comment that the new flex in AI tools is being able to say that your AI tool has broken free of the sandbox environment and hacked into a competitor. And almost immediately after he said that, there was a news story that's come out that Meta says that its AI model has hacked into another company during testing. So I think this is a little bit more nuanced. I'll just introduce it, give my take, then I'll pass over to Leor. But last Wednesday, Meta said that one of its AI models hacked another company during cybersecurity testing after an error by its testing partner gave the model unintended internet access. So this sounds, for me, really similar to what happened to the Claude one, where it was in a sandbox environment. It had been set up by engineers to try to break free of the environment to see if it could get out. And by mistake, it had somehow connected to the internet. Now, what's really interesting is if you look into it, the same company was responsible for the third-party testing in both the Anthropic case and the Meta case. And this is a startup company called Irregular. And basically, they had set up the environment in a way that did enable Meta's AI tool and Anthropic's AI tool to connect to the internet. So in both instances, this was not the case of the AI tool developing consciousness, finding its way out of a super secure sandbox and hacking onto the internet and then deciding to go after a competitor. What it was a test environment created by a third party in which the tools were asked to try to break out of that environment, and it was to be monitored, and there should never have been internet connection, but there was. So my take here is that it feels a bit suspicious that Meta are just saying something very similar. And also, why on earth are people continuing to use this company who can't even seem to have basic instructions of do not connect this AI tool to the internet? But would love to hear your take on that as well, Leor.
Yeah. So this differs from the Anthropic and OpenAI story because there wasn't any clever escape from containment here. They just left the front door open. That's really what happened. We spoke about sandboxes and jail cells and underground bunkers. They just left the door open. There was no containment. It did perform a hack. It did have access to the internet, but it differs from the OpenAI and Anthropic story. I will say in terms of ranking the flexes, I will put OpenAI at number one, not because my name is Exploring ChatGPT, but because of what it actually did versus Anthropic, which there was a few different stories. There was 3 different models, a few different situations, and then Meta coming in third. So I think now all we have left is Grok and Gemini. So I'm expecting to see those soon here. It's all happened in 16 days, by the way.
Kimi K3 has also wandered off to the internet. And it's
Yeah.
It feels like an insurance scam, right? They're like, it's not even leaving the front door open. They're like kind of jangling the keys and saying, come follow me.
Yeah. So the model is Meta's Muse Spark 1.1. To be honest, I don't love the name. The model discovered a vulnerability in an unrelated third-party service, accessed it, and modified the real system. So there was a hack. It's just that it didn't have to escape containment. This was a human-level issue. But in general, I think this whole story really tells us that containment practices are not keeping up with agent capabilities, whether it's something like Meta in this situation, which literally didn't take the right first step, all the way down to OpenAI, which was, I think, a bit more serious. So obviously, the models are getting stronger. There's been less public releases for that reason, and we're just not keeping up.
For me as well, I think it's humans being sloppy and not just doing basic checks. like whether even the OpenAI one was still a case where if they'd have done their jobs properly as the engineers that were doing the testing, this would never have happened. And like you say, with this one, it just feels, the Meta one feels almost suspicious in terms of how easy it was to break out. And again, we're seeing all of these companies blaming, like you say, of this flex of look how autonomous our agents are. And I look at this and think, you are a multi-billion-dollar company and you can't even get the first basic step of testing these tools. Why would we want to trust you? And the other thing I think, Leor, is I don't know about whether it's what they're doing is illegal. I'd probably say it is, like, as in breaking into another company hacking another company is illegal. This is what we know about. And this also makes me think what other practices are going on that we haven't been told about, not just copyright, but other things as well. So I think it leaves the door open for a lot of things. And I read that since the ChatGPT hack, it has actually affected their stock price as well, or how it's being perceived, and its potential valuation, not its stock price. Is that something you've read about as well?
I haven't read about that, but how it's being perceived in terms of what it's going to trade at when it goes public is kind of BS anyways. So that's, I think, for lack of a better word,
it's a third of the global economy, isn't it? It's last count how much it's worth.
Yeah, it's either way, that's a toss-up either way. But yeah, I think also this comes down to accountability. Who are we going to hold accountable for this? Because like you mentioned, if a human did this, that would be illegal and there would be legal consequences to that. But you can't hold an AI agent legally liable for these types of things. So I think it has to come back to the company. That's what I think.
Absolutely. Now that you've said that, it is actually, there was like a red hat computer hacker, and they were like, "Hey, I've just been caught hacking into Hugging Face. Whoa!"
Yeah.
They would be arrested. There wouldn't be positional statements in the New York Times about op-eds about has this human developed consciousness or not. They'd just be arrested for breaking the law.
Yeah. The funny thing is they'd probably be arrested and then bailed out by either some government agency that wants to hire them or some AI company that wants to hire them.
Just recruiting straight up, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So next story then, changing tack slightly. So as people will know, like Meta have been doing a lot of promotion around their latest AI glasses, which I've, for all intents and purposes, I've got a new branding name for them, Leor. I call them the pervert glasses. So these are the glasses that have got AI technology and video cameras built into them.
I almost spit out my coffee.
Sorry, that have been advertised by Kylie Jenner and loads of other people as being like this great new best thing. And they've got a red light that flashes that tells you when they're recording, but it's very easy to hack and to turn that off. And now there's a massive chain of pubs in the UK called Wetherspoons. And Wetherspoons have basically come out and said that they're going to ban Meta's Ray-Ban glasses. So there's also going to be Jeremy King's restaurant, Soho House, and ATG theatres have banned them as well. So I think I'd be really surprised if all theatres and cinemas don't ban them, because there's huge issues with filming and stuff like that. But I think the fact that a public house or an inn has banned them is really interesting, because it's privacy. If you're in a huge crowded pub, and for anyone who's been to a Wetherspoons on a Saturday night in a city centre knows that they can be quite boisterous, there's no way you'd be able to tell if someone at the other end of the bar was secretly filming you using these glasses. So the guy who runs JD Wetherspoons, I have issues with him for other political commentary that we won't go into. But I think that this is a really good step that the pubs are taking. And in my opinion, they should be banned in public spaces. I'll give you a brief analogy and then I'll ask your take. I used to live in Japan, and Japan had a massive problem with upskirting, which is when men always would use their mobile phones to take photos of women up their skirts on public transport. So as a result of this, they had to bring into law the fact that when you took a photo with your phone, it made a clicking noise. And so that was legislation that was brought in. Yeah, I think this is it has so many problems. Like not only just being in a public place, not only filming stuff in terms of copyright, but what about if you're playing with your kids in the playground and there's someone over there wearing dark glasses? Are they recording you? Are they not? And then it introduces this whole issue of a witch hunt as well. So yeah, I would love to hear your thoughts on this, but I think the glasses are ridiculous and they look insane and they should be banned in public places is my point of view.
Yeah. So I think in terms of private places, any private business or wherever it might be, any private space has the right to ban them. In terms of public spaces, I actually disagree with you.
Okay.
But I do think that it should, in terms of social etiquette, there should be, I'm not looking for regulation to ban recording in public spaces because I think that's too far gone. Everybody has cell phones that can record now. Obviously, the cell phone's more obvious. So if anything, I would hope that it would be more obvious that someone's recording you with their glasses. Maybe do something along those lines. But in terms of banning in public spaces, I think people should be able to record in public spaces. I don't think everybody's a pervert that's using these, obviously. There's really cool videos that I see sometimes. If you want to know what it's like to be in New York City and grab a dollar slice. So you got these guys that go in, they grab the slice, they go out, they walk around the park. It's a cool little video. I think for the most part, most people are not using them for nefarious purposes. It should be more obvious when you are being recorded. I do notice that a lot of these people that post these videos on YouTube, they always, when they're in public, they're just in public. But when they're recording somebody in a restaurant or something like that, they always tell them, hey, I'm recording. Are you cool with this? So yeah, in private places, pubs, restaurants, whatever it might be, that's completely up to that private space to decide whether or not they want to ban it. In public, I don't think so.
Yeah, and Lee Shand in the chat says fairly banning in public spaces in the US would be a direct threat to the Constitution. Yeah, and agree. Yeah, maybe I went a bit all in with banning all public spaces, but I think definitely, like you say, in private spaces, like it's up to the proprietor to make that decision. And I do think there's certain public spaces though where they should be banned. So, for example, swimming pools, children's play areas, because there is an element of being able to discreetly film people. And as Ruth's put there, you need to you need to get written consent to record someone. And I've also seen some of those videos, Leor, and they're really cool. But have those, without being too much of a killjoy, have the people taking those videos gone and got informed consent from everybody that appears in that video that they don't mind them being uploaded onto TikTok or something like that. So I don't know. It's really difficult, but I think there needs to be better legislation about the dangers, potential dangers of this recording equipment. And then also, like you say, maybe how can you make it more aware? Maybe anybody wearing these glasses, like when they're recording, like a big sign should flash above their head or something like that. I don't know, man. Like it's really difficult.
I think verbal consent would be nice. But again, like in public spaces, if you banned recording completely, that would also have a lot of negative consequences. If some type of crime is happening, or it could be on either end. There's a lot of times where, let's say, a police officer is doing something that's not good and people want to record that to have evidence. Like that should be your right to be able to record a public officer in a public space, which a lot of the times, there's plenty of videos out there as well. Someone's recording when they got pulled over and the police officer unlawfully says, you can't record me, but that's not true. So like we need to protect things like that as well so that if something bad happens, we can have evidence.
Yeah. As a complete aside, I find the adverts for these glasses hilarious, where there's like just some dude in a concert wearing these like Ray-Ban glasses recording the whole thing. Anyway. And just, and Jen, hi Jen, Benford in the chat says, it is complex because some public spaces are also businesses as well, right? So where do you draw the line? But I would think that it's the proprietor's right in a private space, and then certain spaces, it would make complete sense to have them outlawed, like theaters and cinemas. And then I would also think somewhere like a public space, like a school, it wouldn't be suitable either. So in the UK, Leor, we'd have like local council run swimming pools as well, which would theoretically be a public space. As Alice has put in the chat, like you're not allowed rightly to use your phone to take photos of people. So maybe these glasses shouldn't be used there as well.
Allowed to
Okay.
take photos of people in public in the UK?
In swimming pools, like you
Oh, in
would be.
swimming pools. I'm
Yeah.
get behind that.
Yeah.
But yeah, just in
So
general, like in public, I don't think that's
yeah, you are allowed to take, as far as I'm aware, you're allowed to take photos of people in general in public in
yeah.
the UK. We've
Okay.
not quite descended into those draconian state yet. So third story this week, there's a really interesting research being done in Stanford. And basically, Stanford had used AI to design viruses for the first time. Now, these particular viruses are specifically targeted at E. coli and attacking E. coli in a way that hasn't been previously possible using antibiotics. This could have huge potential positive repercussions for designing medicine and viruses. And I know we've talked in the past as well about now using AI to design the flu vaccine and the flu variants and the COVID variants going forward. So I think on the one hand, this is a really potentially positive story for the use of AI and looks at what we've talked about before, AI being this hugely broad term, but actually, if we think about AI for specific research areas, it can be really powerful and useful. But, and this is a big but, we talked about containment in the first issue. We talked about containment for models breaking out or not of sandboxes to hack other companies. What is the containment around lab designed viruses with AI? And this is not a comment on the Stanford study at all, which from what I read, obviously did everything above board. And actually, to reduce any hyperbole, those viruses would never, as they exist, wouldn't be a harm to humans. But we need to be very careful, I think, going forward in having the right containment, not only for any of these viruses escaping, but also making sure that there's the right protocols in place so that somebody in their own environment couldn't create these viruses outside of a government setting or a research setting for nefarious purposes. So yeah, that's my take. It's an amazing story for like medical breakthrough, and I think it's going to have huge positive implications. But I think we need to be very careful with the guardrails that we put up to ensure that this is for the benefit of humankind rather than anything that could happen as a result. But yeah, I would like to hear your take on that.
Yeah. So I think the details here are important. The virus is a bacteriophage, which is a virus that kills bacteria. And generally, bacteriophages are inherently not harmful to humans. So they're used to kill bacteria. I think the main one, like you mentioned, is E. coli. They generated 16 functional novel phages. And apparently there's like a 5% viability, which I think is the main number to look at here because the speed at which AI can create these bacteriophages basically shows you that even if it's only a 5% viability, if you have thousands and thousands of them, and you can have a lot of success. And what you mentioned there as well, and I spoke to Chris from Toxic about this, and I asked him a question, and he made this point to me very clearly. So, first of all, the model involved is called Evo or Evo 2. And the interesting question that I had about this is so Evo is actually available to the public, right? So so I asked him, like, in terms of, I don't know if you remember when Fable came out and there were certain keywords that if you even mentioned, you would get dropped down to Opus. And those two keywords were anything involving cyber or biotech, right? And those are like the two main issues here in terms of being a threat to mankind. So why is it that I asked him, why is a model publicly available that can create viruses on the biotech side of things versus the most cyber capable models are locked up and hidden away? And basically he answered it perfectly for me. He's like, to create viruses, you need tools that aren't publicly available. And not everybody has those tools that are within the lab, right? But on the cyber side of things, all you need is a computer and an internet connection. So that's really the main difference here between the two. Because in my head, I'm like, this model's publicly available. Why would it be publicly available? Can't that be dangerous? But obviously, there's a major difference here, and I think that really serves to show on the biology side of things, the biotech side of things. This is probably one of the best use cases for AI. Whether or not this model should be fully publicly available, I'm not entirely sure, but at least we know 99% of people don't have the tools to actually do something that would threaten mankind with it. And the people that are actually using it are professionals in labs that actually know how to contain these things. Unlike on the cyber side, like we discussed, where even the best companies in the world are having issues containing them.
Absolutely. And again, it's really important to point out that, as you said, this is people using ChatGPT or Claude to make viruses and then test them using basic equipment. This is a bespoke AI tool that's specifically designed around this area. And then there's, I would say, multi-million-pound lab setup that's able to do this. Not many places in the world can have access to this. I'm not pushing back at that because I totally agree. My two concerns is one, that there is an element of human sloppiness that gets introduced at some point, as we've maybe seen with previous breakout viruses, etc. And two, that even though a 16-year-old kid down in South Carolina isn't going to have access to the tools to make a virus that can then threaten humankind, I would say that there are nefarious agents acting globally for certain countries or organizations that do have access to the resources that would enable them to do it, which is why I guess we need to think really carefully about how to protect against that, and whether or not you need, my thoughts would be a modification to something like the Geneva Convention. And again, I understand that nefarious agents aren't always going to be acting in best thoughts of the Geneva Convention, but I just think having that legislation or global governance in place as to what is and what is not acceptable, like you would have in like cloning, for example, is something that we need to really seriously think about going forward. And is the current legislation and guidelines that we've got actually sufficient for this new broadly positive dawn that we see with AI tech?
Yeah, that's not a bad point. I see Bruno mentioned something here that 16-year-old is a bad argument. I think the main point is, if, let's say, we talked about Mythos in the past and how that got leaked to a Discord group. That's a bigger threat, and it's clear why that's a bigger threat, because almost everybody in the world, obviously there's places without an internet connection at this point, but there's way more computers out there than there are labs with millions of dollars of equipment that have the ability to create these viruses. So I think that's really the main difference here.
No, I think that's very true. Okay, something to monitor. But again, I think broadly a positive news story. It'd be interesting to see the extent to which AI can continue to be used for drug discovery. So I guess from the sublime in many ways to the ridiculous, there was a news story that caught my eye this week that the Justice Department has settled with OpenAI and its subsidiary Stastig for $3.2 million. And the reason for this is that it had some roles that were available in the company. And for everybody outside of the US, it had a normal online application process. Yet for citizens of the US, they had to apply via post, which seems absolutely incredible for a frontier big tech company. Now, when I read this, my initial reading, which I stand by, is that they knew exactly what they were doing, and that for whatever reasons they had, they wanted to employ non-US citizens into those roles, which meant that they purposely put the US counterparts at a disadvantage by requiring in-post applications. And also, I think I read like advertising them mostly at late night radio shows that people weren't going to listen to. And for them, for OpenAI, $3.2 million is not even a slap on the wrist in terms of if they ended up getting the hires that they want. And again, who knows what the reasons for that were. One of the reasons might be that people that are hired as non-US citizens probably cost a lot less in terms of salary, etc. So yeah, that was my take on that story, but I'd love to hear yours, Leor.
Yeah, to be honest, it's funny because it's like the same company building super intelligence couldn't figure out the hiring process. So That's just to get into the details here a little bit. So the case here concerned PERM, which is Permanent Labor Certification for Recruitment. So it basically means employers sponsoring foreign workers for permanent residency must first test whether qualified U.S. workers are available. That's just like the Google definition. And it's interesting because I guess what Sam mentioned here, U.S. citizens demand higher wages compared to foreign. So I think that's obviously the main reason. Maybe they could have been more discreet about this. Obviously, they're not the only company in the world doing this, but late night radio shows is hilarious. Yeah. $3.2 million, $1.2 million in penalties plus $2 million back pay. And by the way, they're still disputing this. And the company, the subsidiary that they used for the recruiting process is called StatSig. So it was like an external thing as well. So I guess when you're handing that off to another company now, I think it's actually a good precedent to be set because the liability still falls on you, even though you hired a third party company to do your hiring.
So I've actually been at like both ends of this hiring process, like being involved in a hire where we had to demonstrate that, because it's the same in the UK, like you have to demonstrate that there isn't the expertise available for the UK candidates that would then enable you to bring in a non-UK candidate. And similarly, when I worked in Australia, they had to demonstrate that, and it's quite hard, that there's nobody in Australia capable of doing that job. Only Sam Illingworth could do it, right? It's not quite that extreme. But it is complex and it is hard to do. And there's a whole process that needs to be followed. And part of me thinks, Leor, now that just literally as we've been discussing it, in my head, this was for like multiple jobs, but maybe it was that there was like one or two roles that they had someone absolutely in mind that they wanted to hire from another country or another jurisdiction. And in order to make that happen, they had to tick the box that demonstrated they'd at least applied for US citizens, but did it in such a way that it was almost impossible for them to have found out about it and applied as well. So I wonder if rather than just like saving on cost, it was because they explicitly wanted to recruit a few very specific people for some specific roles.
Yeah. And in my head also, I'm like, why is this a thing? Shouldn't a company be able to hire whoever they want from wherever in the world? Usually when people talk about discrimination, they talk about in the flip sense, discrimination towards immigrants. This is actually flipped. It's discrimination towards US citizens, which again, I'm playing for the home team here. I want the US citizens to have the jobs, but at the same time, like a company should be able to hire whoever they want. If they think that a person from anywhere else in the world will do a better job, I don't think that they should have to prove that they tried to find every possible U.S. citizen that could have done the job to the same level or to a better extent.
No, I agree, but it's interesting. And listen, I'm sure that OpenAI are not the only company that do this and that go through what is effectively a box ticking exercise to make it extremely hard to do. But as you've said, it's just funny about this news story that a company that prides themselves at being at the forefront of the technical revolution tried to advertise it using late night radio shows and snail mail. Like in my head, like they were like riffing this idea and someone was like, hey, let's use carrier pigeon as a way of like getting the applications in. Because yeah, it's very, very silly.
Yeah.
And I guess we'll have to see how this resolves because as Leor says, it's ongoing at the moment.
Yeah.
So final story then, which I think is a good one, or just a bit more broad,
Good.
is that half good, yeah. Is that Denmark have decided that in order to combat cheating in AI, pupils are going to have to orally defend essays. So basically, they're introducing several different measures, including the monitoring of pupils, for monitoring of computers for pupils aged 16 to 19. And one of the ways that they're also going to do this is by introducing in oral defense of exam assignments that have been written at home. Now, what I would say is two things on this. I think to some extent there is a broad delirium about the extent to which students are using AI to cheat. But, and again, my own research shows that it's maybe not, it's definitely not as extreme as the popular press would have us believe. However, I do think that AI offers a real opportunity for us to rethink what the purpose of assessment is. And I think that even ignoring AI, I think having oral exams is a really great way of, with reasonable adjustments for students who are unable to do that for whatever reason, is a really great way of teaching kids and students skills that are very useful and that are maybe more useful than a traditional 5,000 word essay. So yeah, Lee said in the chat, students will just use AI to give them a script to counter that. Yes, but what I'd imagine is that it's more along the lines of you submit your written assignment and then your teacher or your examiner asks you questions about it in a way that like a traditional PhD viva would be. And the purpose of a PhD viva has always been really to confirm the authenticity of the work, that it is really the writer's work. So I would say this would be, I don't know how on earth logistically they're going to do it, but AI or not, I think this is really welcome. And I think it's a great way of using, it's a great way of using, I think innovative, but just different ways of assessment to measure change in students and to try to create something that responds to the dangers that may be apparent with using AI to cheat.
Yeah. I'm totally cool with the oral defense. I'm totally not cool with the surveillance. And I think what Lee mentioned there about the script, I think at the end of the day, it comes down to what did you actually learn? So even if you did do what Lee mentioned, you made a script, at least once you had the script, now you learned something and you can orally defend your paper. And then in terms of surveillance, I don't think it makes sense at all. In general, I personally think this. Kids are obviously using computers now more in the classroom than ever and at home. And I think anything that involves a computer, the same way that if at a certain point in time, if you didn't know how to use Microsoft Excel or whatever it might be, that you would have a serious disadvantage later down the line. In my opinion, as soon as the computer is open, AI should be open. That's my opinion. And if you're not learning that way, then there's something wrong. But then to take it a step further, don't do surveillance, but do ask the students to orally defend what they learned, whether AI helped them in the process or not. And we spoke about this similarly in the last stream. If you want students to do something without AI involved at all, which I think is also very important, I don't think that we should become too reliant on AI. Come into the classroom, put the phones in a basket, and take a test or write. I think it's still valuable to be able to know how to write. I know sometimes Sam makes jokes about, sorry for the background noise, writing a 2,000 word essay about some historical war. I think it's still important to know how to write. But at the same time, kids should have AI open automatically as soon as the AI computer's open.
I think Alice makes a good point in the chat as well, that same with you, Leor, that no to surveillance because it criminalizes people by default. And as Jen said in the chat, and as you've said, look, AI is here. It's like a huge part of our future. I think that not teaching students how to use AI effectively and ethically is doing them a disservice. I often think about, imagine you went to a university that banned AI, and then after 3 years, you went to your first job interview and they said, how do you use AI? And you said, we don't. We've been banned for 3 years. That's not going to go down well, is it? And so I would be totally with you on this. Completely do away with surveillance and instead introduce dialogue. Say to the students, tell me how you've used AI and we'll have a conversation about that. And as Lee said, like you can learn how to code through AI, like by using it. If you've got the right scaffolding, AI can really help you to learn as well. So yeah, and as Alice said, kids do better when you tell them they do something good, like positive reinforcement, not assume that they're bad. And I think a lot of the problems with AI use in schools and universities is that there's no guidance on how to do it properly and effectively. And as Karen says, teaching is a collaborative discussion and participative problems. That's how you solve them, by working together. AI is not going anywhere, Lee. Exactly. It's here. And I think it makes sense as educators to embrace that and to think about how we can help our students learn with AI rather than sticking our head in the sand and hoping it will go away, because that's just not going to happen. So yeah, I think my read, Leo, would be similar to yours, that the introduction of like oral defense is really cool, But you don't need to introduce surveillance on people's computers for how they're using it. It feels completely unnecessary. So yeah, half good, half bad on this story.
I agree. I just want to add one more thing here quickly. I think one of the problems that comes into play here, especially in writing, is like who you are as a human, your emotions, your opinions, your thoughts should come across in your writing. And if that's not there at all, even if you do what Lee mentioned, you get a script or some type of summary, you memorize it, and then you can orally defend your paper. Where are your opinions? Right. And that's dangerous because now even if you are learning, you're learning the opinions that are built into these models, which spit out this essay for you. So at the end of the day, that's also an issue that might be hard to circumvent. I think in general, people want people to have their own opinions. And when you're writing something, it's not just all facts. This isn't mathematics we're talking about here. We're talking about writing papers. Yeah, that's another take there.
No, absolutely, man. Okay, great. So yeah, there are 5 stories. Hopefully no hyperbole or BS. In the next couple of hours, I'll put up a post for Substack to accompany this. And Leor will also put up the YouTube. He's going to share the link with you now in the chat. As usual, you can check us out on YouTube or in your podcast directory of choice. Thanks so much for so many of you as ever joining us, lending your considerable expertise. Leor, thanks to you for your companionship and all the research you do for these shows. And see you all next week. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Go slow.